The Blood Painter. Donald struggled with an obstacle typical of painters: lack of motivation, drive, and a channel to draw the gift into his hands and creative joy for all viewers. For many artists, that was a death knell. He was no exception. It was the equivalent of asthma, or the colors going grey in the eyes, like sporadic, chronic and spontaneous combustion of the brain resulting in typical of color blindness that lasts forever. It wasn't fun. If anyone could imagine what it would be like to lose arms, legs, eyes and ears, that's what the form of block, similar to writer's block, was like for a painter. It could be said Donald had the most severe case in the universe, although he could only imagine someone out there had it worse than him. He would spend an ungodly amount of hours in front of the canvas in his dried up, drab Los Angeles, California studio, staring at the whiteness as if to somehow conjure the color. But no avail. It never came. As if some injection in the back of his neck filled it in a type of downer meant to retard the brain synapses and choke the imagination out of him. Not even a field, or a landscape, an ocean, nothing. He yet could see motion in his surroundings. A fly sailing across the white canvas, but landing delicately on a strict fabric as a plane would do on a landing strip. Within seconds it lifted off, carrying on. Donald could hear the faint traffic sounds of trucks, sedans, motorcycles and even bikes reverberating around the walls of his studio, and they were all crystal clear. But his hands, his thoughts, his once flowing fire of creativity and color and line explosions evolved from the studies of Michelangelo Buonarroti and a fervent desire to paint a couple ceiling, or the unwavering exploration of Leonardo da Vinci, or the Jackson Pollock splashes of nothingness and everythingness cascading deeply into something deserving, yet destructive. At least Pollock did something, he thought. True art was also action, motion, movement, and he wasn't even doing that. In a way, Donald was painting. Everything else around him was the painter. He, the creation. The world around him, the creator. That's not how it was supposed to be. As a result, bills had to be paid by part-time jobs, old gigs and borrowing from mommy and daddy. He spent most of his days, though, not painting, but ejaculating into his hand or leg, while lying on the couch, stretched out spread-eagled, and fixated on some porn film he had borrowed from a local video store. Sadly, he didn't have the income to manage a Netflix account. The dream slowly dying, he only reminisced about how there had been a promise in his craft once. The Art Institute of Chicago had suddenly noticed when he studied there back in the day. A couple of art galleries in California had even prospected him. He came relatively close to running his own exhibit, but somehow, somewhere in his life, the spark withered, sippets, spitets of smoke, it seemed, wafted from it, drifting into a void of reality. He was certain it didn't happen instantly, but it suddenly felt like it did, when it, the spur of a rush of tactical day and night, go through paperwork, run these errands, make it on time to dinner for that part, time shift. Damn it, my head hurts. I need to go to the bathroom. It burns when I pee. What's going on with me? Somewhere in the middle of all those thoughts was when the spark went out. He then woke up one day and felt nothing. and it was the closest thing to death. At the very least, he managed. As mentioned, Donald wasn't taking on some part-time jobs and all of that, just to make do. But a nagging itch inside his mind was the question, what's wrong with me? It had to be something, anything. He went to therapists, doctors, acupuncturists, hypnotists, shamans even. They pretty much all said the same thing. Let's work on it. It will take time. This will be a process. This process will take time. We will work on this process and it will take time. He even considered CAT scans or MRIs. Maybe it really was in his head. A tumor perhaps. Banging the walls and wanting to rip out his scantily dirty blonde hair. He was sick of hearing the word time bleed out of everyone's mouths. Not mouths. Mind you, just one big gaping, massive, ugly black hole of a mouth. As all the medical professionals in the world and their world seemed to merge together into their weird recording cacophony of montages, repeating the same thing over and over, and over again, and over, and over, and over again, like a chorus from hell. Not a bunch of singular singers grouped together, but a mutated musical monster. Skin parts crafted together in odd, misshapen ways. And with just one mouth. It was madness. At least, that's what it felt like to him. He snapped. And there was only one thing he could do. Sharp. You see, Donald at the very least did have some solace. A back end with refuge to the madness. It was him and some stumbling block that was the apartment world. He was shopping for art, or art supplies, or anything that had to do with art. Oftentimes, he would visit other art galleries and just peruse, window shopping, as a result of not having the coin to manage some of the so-called masterpieces he saw, as a way to somehow garnish musing and inspiration to fuel a rebellion inside his brain. Other times, he mended in art supply stores for maybe a new interesting brush, bigger canvases, and other apparatus to spur him on. The products were, of course, much cheaper than created works on the walls of galleries. But there were those days when paintbrushes didn't do much for him, except remind him that he was a wannabe, a hack, a has-been. Truly, it was a toss-up, a lesser evil, a chance to take and hope that the activity would be enough to manifest something into his canvases, into the studio, and make something of himself. Another way he sought to avoid the repetitive nonsense of art supply studios was study up on new stores popping up all around his area. Not too far away, of course. Gas was expensive. He wasn't against going for a stroll, as starving artists did on so many occasions. This was his life, and a tough one at that. One day, he did catch wind of a store, of a diamond in the rough, tucked away in a corner of a back lot no one would ever notice. Those were the gems, hard to find, but masterful in exploration. Chances were good that even a paintbrush in those stores would make him feel like a maestro once more. The store was called the Sangnickel Corner, and walking into it on a Friday afternoon was like entering into a new world. Alien to humans, friendly to celestials. The ceiling was painted in galaxies, and the walls were like Van Gogh paintings turned murals to break the symmetry of shelves, boxes and beige floors. Literally dozens of big paintbrushes, rollers, cans of paint, watercolors, colored pencils, gel pens, manga design kits, art stamps, sketch pads, and more lined some of the walls excellently as Donald drove himself with his feet to the front. It was like being a kid again. That's when he saw the guy, assumed to be the owner of the store. He was the only one there. Normally, you could tell if there was some store occasioned by the sound in the back, but even that was silent, as some private artistic padded room with only faint sound of wind across the windows. Dressed in a dirty brown cardigan, the older gentleman hunched over back end of his counter, organized materials, or perhaps drawing something for himself. Donald couldn't tell. His back was so massive, bigger than the hunchback of the Notre Dame. Excuse me, Donald said. The man turned his head a bit to the left. Welcome, can I help you? Donald fiddled his fingers. Just wanted to compliment you on your store. It's beautiful. He then swiveled in his chair, revealing his face, covered in a few skin tags and wrinkles of a tired Gandalf with a big nose, lacking any kind of hair save some strangled strands. It was a bit of a setback to see, but not surprising, given the location of the store, the fact that he was the only customer in it, and that there were no other employees. It made Donald think that this man knew what starving artist truly was, and it made him feel at home. He grinned something toothy and toothless. Appreciate that. Truly, you're an artist? Donald smiled, shrugging. I suppose. He nodded. I see. Still trying to discover the right strokes. He then shoveled a bit to the left, groaning as he got up. Well, let me know if you need anything. Honestly, what I'd like to know is what you recommend for inspiration here. Something cheap too. He guffed. Of course, cheap is a comedy here too, but nothing too cheap. Products cost a bit to have here. He almost sounded offended, and his wrinkly face looked even a bit scary as the result. I don't mean any offense. Oh, you're fine. He rushed it off. Well, if you want my honest opinion, he pointed close to the front of the store, where all the brushes and paint were. Those supplies really are just tools. Anyone can use them. Well, yeah, but don't they feel good holding on to? And it's all about color and paint. Brings life to the canvas. True, but you need a canvas. They're useless without the canvas, the foundation, the paper which then grows the masterpiece. He raised his arms in triumph, masterfully. Donald looked around. I suppose I would picture the canvas as the earth, the soil, that would ultimately bring about the biggest trees. You would of course need to plant these seeds. He pointed up, knowingly. But that's all it takes. The seeds are useless without it. Now, the earth will always be there waiting for new birth to come. Nothing can take that anyway. But someone can take away the seeds. And then you can always get more. A canvas though, virtually limited by size. Perhaps a wall. And then he pointed at some of his Van Gogh murals, or the side of a building or a sculpture, or a little sketch pad, or anything at all. They're irreplaceable. He leaned in, placing his hand on the counter. It was the first time Donald saw that he had steely grey eyes. Your canvas could be anything. Even yourself. Donald nodded, the ends of his mouth coming down in a thought. Poignant, really, in a dried-up librarian sort of way, like Bastian Buck's never-ending story. Inside he chuckled just a little bit, thinking it was stupid, but mystified all at the same time. The owner then helped him browse some of the various canvases, until Donald hit a call with his eyes, and one particular large set with canvases behind the counter. locked away in a glass case on the wall, 6 by 6. The case had a label on it, the blood-painted canvas. As the owner kept pontificating about some fibers and materials, cotton duck and linen, panels and rolls, it was then that Donald thought he heard a whisper echo from somewhere else. Blood. And he snapped, compelled. What's the type of canvas on the wall? That stopped the owner clean. That silence. If he knew what Donald was referring to, this might have stopped several times before with other customers. At least the very rare ones that would have shown up in the store. Suddenly, Donald felt an energy, heated from the massive hunchback, bleed into his brain like an hemorrhage. Like when people get awkward at questions and don't know how to respond, so they ache to avoid answering at all costs. It was a negative energy. It didn't felt good. He slowly turned around, gazing at Donald with those grey eyes. Would you like to see one of them? He asked, deadpan. Donald blinked, not expecting that. His first thought was this blood-painted canvas product had to be one of the pricier items, given the glass case and the placement behind the counter. And he knew that his impression wasn't that of a monkey maker, of infamous celebrity painter. Shockingly, Donald didn't even need to respond. The man marched to the back of the counter, as if Donald already gave his answer, unlocking the case with a latch, twitching the wood with creaks and groans unlike the man's groans with his back. He pulled out one massive canvas out for Donald to gulp over. It looked even bigger outside of the case. With those grey eyes, he stared at Donald. I didn't mention that the canvas means everything. We have here the understatement of the century. This canvas is everything. It looked stark white to Donald. He just tilted his head in wonder. It was called a blood-painted canvas, but the owner elaborated further, educating Donald on the newest medium in art world, blood painting. But the canvas was the key, specifically for struggling artists in the industry. The canvas imbued the design for desires, to view that they were unparalleled in scope, amassing such positive response. But it only worked, and this threw Donald a bit, by using blood as paint. What kind of blood? Any kind. It would make the canvas come to life, the honest said. At first Donald thought it was avant-garde extreme, bohemian on acid, with abstract expressionism at its most biological in nature. But he was game. Using blood as paint? Interesting for sure, but also the owner was truly cryptic at what he meant by how the canvas would use blood as paint, as perhaps a guiding muse for an artist to craft a visual story, and a story that would come to life. He didn't illustrate how. He didn't illustrate what kind of blood he should use. None of that. He did, however, state that it shouldn't be warm, as in fresh. Thankfully, no vampires allowed. But Donald had to laugh at himself at the territory he was getting himself into. Suggestions included going to blood banks, donating, and also approaching slaughterhouses to ask for blood. He admitted it was a bit creepy. A cow, a dog, a cat, chicken. He submerged that the blood could be from anything, maybe a human. But seriously, what human want to siphon their own fluids for the sake of a painting? Donald would, and why not? The owner didn't say that he couldn't do that. Needless to say, Donald coughed up anything he could possibly muster for just one canvas, 6 by 6, and a good deal given his situation. The owner seemed to understand quite well how difficult the industry was, and he didn't blink twice at the thought of offering a discount. $16 for the size of that canvas. Donald knew it was a great deal. Dragging the canvas was a chore as it didn't fit into his little car. Walking several blocks wasn't kind to the calves and knees. To make it worse, he did have to, at some point, run back and get his bicycle. But not tonight. He was shivering with joy. He had a new endeavor to partake in. Part of the art with involved breaking the norms, pushing the envelope, setting a new bar, going extreme. This was to be about as extreme as could be. While the owner did say not to use warm blood, he had one problem. He didn't have the resources to purchase bags and bags of cold blood. So, what was he to do? This was his version of extreme. Getting to a studio was the first step. Barely getting the canvas in, he set it on the wall and structure to find equipment necessary to accomplish what he wanted. They needed a tourniquet. Ruffling his already matted hair, it wasn't an easy task until he found some long rubber bands. But that wouldn't have been enough to accomplish the task. He needed actual blood drawing supplies. Going online and finding exactly what he needed wasn't hard, yet challenging given the additional cost, so it took a few days to muster up the income. A plethora of options existed right there on the first page of Google. Phlebotomy kits, blood tubes, safety launches, needles, syringes, the whole 9 yards. Instructional guides also helped, keeping him from overdoing it or bursting a vein. Step-by-step procedure was key, as he, of course, wasn't a medical professional, just an ecstatic, starving painter for an inspiration. It had to be the easiest way to go, honestly, better than just buying the blood. He couldn't imagine that it would be any kind of issue using his own blood as a medium, and he certainly wasn't going to hunt for dogs, cats, rats, or other animals, like some kind of raven in the night. That would have been creepy. His thought was, given the many horror flicks that he rented, that using someone else's warm blood would have invoked a demon of vengeance, wreaking havoc upon him like a harbinger of hell for stealing someone else's life force. Giggling at himself, he thought it funny, but far-fetched. Submissing, justifying, and pinpointing the logic that his own ham-gobbling would be just fine was enough to move forward. After all, Donald couldn't steal his own life force from himself. Sitting in the moldy bathroom, he commenced procedure. Following the steps, he inserted a needle into the crease on the other side of his right elbow, taping it down. The tubing was easy. It was like a plug and play, running it down and connecting it to a bag of collection. The pressure was twisting a knob, and then pumping his finger caused the fluid to funnel through the tube, as if he was donating plasma. And then it all made sense. This was how he did it. About an hour into draining, he had to laugh. "I'm a vampire," he said. He imagined the color of his face draining, a deep white, then ever the Nosferatu of the silver screen. Yet he would drift off deeply into stupor and not realize instruction guides did say to maintain fluids as ice packs when necessary, just in case he would feel like he was going under. He came close on a few occasions in that hour, the color and light hazing bright. Funny how that would have been for him to be found by the police, killed by plummettomy in his moldy bathroom. After an entire letter's worth, drinking water washed his insides with solvents of moisture, enveloped in succulent half-life wizardry, and knobbling knees, struggling to stay uniform. Donald imagined anyone watching him, and Scruff panicked in dismay at the fact that his body might have crumbled into falling house of cards. Stretchy skin, the power of dryness over the lack of water. Yet somehow felt fine, he thought. Just a little woozy. The thought of just refrigerating his own blood sickened him. He had to pull himself together. It wasn't going to hurt anything to store his blood and get right to work after getting some protein in him and replace the fluids in his system and renew himself. But he also wondered if the blood was going to be any good just sitting out, like expired milk. He thought perhaps that it was prudent to plan ahead and not theorize the possibilities. After all, this wasn't a horror story. It was a Bohemian Rhapsody of imagination and wonder, birthing a new style of colored canvas and graced the walls of galleries clear and white. And he was going to heal himself as the new Picasso of the 21st century. Too late though. There was no turning back. Ladies would fawn over him like love potion number 9 stricken Strigoi. The countless Lilith Strixes, aching for other intimate fluids to enter their souls through orifices as only they could describe to him in detail. It was going to be glorious. Once everything stopped looking like little brighter than it should have been, he went right back to it, popping his Bluetooth on, synced with his playlist of classical pieces, and placing the canvas against the wall. He took his blood, his paint, with a large brush to maximize the stroke and eventually spread the color. He began painting. Not sure what to expect, the emotion in him was strangely blank, like the world around him stopped. He no longer had anything outside of music. Even with the Bluetooth on listening to chopping, the layer sounds caressed the ears. He normally could hear lots of white noise in the surrounding environments underneath, but no longer. The thick, coat-aged blood smeared softly onto the canvas. Long, combed strokes onto the white jar minded an immediate contrast. At least, he started with a streak, diagonal, across the top portion, building into a spiral, and then sublime transformation began to awaken. Something inside of him, yet he wasn't sure what was to come of it. This was all new for him, an ethereal and cosmic experience. Typically, any painter had at least some idea of what to shape and mold with color and line, but this wasn't the case. Donald had no plan in place. This was off the cuff, soothing from the hip, and letting the brush and his blood guide him into a void of peace, shadows of crimson, darkened by the same hideous whisper. Blood. It echoed every turn, every line. It echoed, echoed. Every line. It was divine and deep, like the blood still coursing through the veins of the canvas. Blood. The whisper just wouldn't stop. After what felt like 15 minutes, Donald wanted to stop for a moment, perhaps catch his breath. Then he realized that something compelled him not to. He simply couldn't put the brush down. And then the whisper inside his head, beneath the lines of chopping, somehow grew that much louder, ingraining within the sputter of the feet inside the Bluetooth, amidst the digital refrain of sound, shattering truth that this wasn't real. His vision grew blurry and hot. Could eyesight get hot? Apparently. Feeling his pupils constricted, he began to wonder, did I drink enough water? Perhaps he just needed a bit more protein in his system. The funny thing was, although his mechanics managed to stubble and stopple, his painting arm kept fluidly gracing an imaginary line seemingly led by the brush to build something magical. It was like dying or sleep. If a drug overdose could happen without snorting, injection, ingesting, or smoking, it would feel exactly like what Donald was feeling. The exceptional remembrance of how to be outside oneself, in a Jim Morrison sort of way, building his own set of doors to walk through and explore an entirely abstract universe with polygons and planes of imagination, all came back to him as a twist of woods on Kansas Town, delivering a sweet, tranquil destruction upon mankind, and his stomach churned something fierce, tightened as a vice would on the temples of his forehead, breaking him down from the capillaries out, as if on the surface of Mars, his eyes felt like they were bulging, squeezed the way air would be out of a flapping fish on dry land, struggling for breath and hollow organs creaking like the doors of a cabinet, which housed the blood-painted canvases. That's when Donald truly started to panic. Why am I out of breath? It couldn't have been a phlebotomy kit. He did everything right. Why was the world spinning? Why did he feel a cold sweat on his forehead? Yet his arm kept moving, dancing, twirling, draining, dipping his brush back into the bucket of blood. The process seemed so mechanized, automated, immediate. He tried to will himself to stop. Maybe he needed a break. Artists always need a break. It was time to breathe, because he couldn't breathe. He needed to breathe. He couldn't breathe. Stop. Blood. 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 Stop. 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 He thought, repeating to himself, but it didn't stop. The whispers, they kept coming. The brush kept moving faster and faster, seemingly on his own. And as he was inebriated with the sounds of some demonic puppeteer helping him paint his entire existence onto the canvas, it was then he felt the same whisper behind him. It was the nighttime in the studio. That one sound echoed. Donald never left. The lights were still on, and while the blood-painted canvas remained with streaks of his blood splattered all over the canvas, that wasn't the only canvas painted. There were others. Small canvases, papers, clipboards, sketch pads, numbers and thousands it seemed, nailed to walls, strewn across the floor on the table, brought to life countless designs in rich scarlet hues. Several dozen odd-shaped figures, not unlike Donald himself, manifested like papier-mâché and two-dimensional as thin paper, but conjured with motion as tapestries in the wind, but marched from canvas to canvas in the studio as humans do, were like automations, each carrying a paintbrush and creating something new on their own respective canvases. The exact same blood used to create the first painting, brought to life. The faces were snapshots of blank and deathly terror, drawings of a male who once was part of the world, but no more. He was now just a never-ending painting.